Hello children. Aesop's fables are famous all over the world. They were written many years ago. They tell you about people or animals and birds who learn a lesson or teach a lesson from the incident they have experienced. These little stories that I will now narrate to you will give you a moral to think about. The first story I tell you is about the bullfrog and the bull. Once a bullfrog lived in a pond. He was a proud bullfrog. He bullied all the other little frogs and tadpoles living in the pond. He thought himself to be not only the biggest thing in the pond, but also the biggest in the world. "I am not an ordinary frog," he would boast proudly. "I am the biggest of our kind, and that is why I am called the bullfrog. I am to other frogs what a bull is to little calves." And he would sit on a rock and gloat over his bigness. Now this bullfrog had never seen a bull. But he was not bothered. One day, a huge bull came to the pond to drink water. The bullfrog was sitting and basking in the sun with his eyes closed. When he heard someone lapping the water, he opened his eyes to see who it was. For a moment, he was startled to see the bull. He was so huge. He asked him, "Who are you?" The bull looked down and scornfully said, "I am a bull, can't you see?" The bullfrog was quite shocked to learn that this enormous creature was a bull, but that did not stop him from showing off. "You think you are very big, don't you?" he said to the bull. "But I can make myself as big as you." The bull hardly bothered to hear the little creature that croaked away. But the proud frog would not give up easily. "You don't believe what I say?" he asked the bull. "You just watch me." He blew himself up to twice his size, but the bull just kept ignoring him. "Oh, so you think I'm not big enough?" the bullfrog croaked. "I can make myself even bigger. You look at me." The bull not only looked at him with disgust, but he made a scornful sound and turned his head away. The bullfrog could not bear this. "I will show the bull how big I can be." He took a huge breath and he blew and he blew and he blew himself up until he burst. So children, what do we learn from this story of the proud bullfrog? Don't try to seem bigger than what you really are. The Nurse and the Wolf. A very hungry wolf was wandering around the countryside looking for something to eat. He was quite tired and angry because he had found nothing so far. Just then he passed by a cottage and heard a nurse scolding a little child who was crying. "Stop crying. Shh, hush down. Please be quiet. If you make any more noise now, I will really throw you out to the wolves." She was so disgusted. "Aha! I am in great luck," said the wolf to himself as he licked his lips. "All I have to do now is to wait for the child to start crying again, and the nurse will give me the child. And I'm sure the child will definitely cry again, and I will be sure of a juicy and delicious supper. Ha ha ha!" Yes, the child did start crying again, The wolf was thrilled, and he walked up to the window, wagging his tail and waiting greedily. And the nurse happened to pass the window. When she saw the wolf, she shrieked, "Go away! Go away, you horrible monster! Go away at once, or I will have someone to shoot you down!" She held the little child close and quickly shut the window. The wolf was most surprised. He turned away and walked off slowly, grumbling to himself, "You can't trust anyone nowadays." So children, it just proves that you should not believe everything you hear. And the next story is a famous story about the crow and the pitcher. A crow was dying of thirst. The day was hot and sunny, and he was tired of flying about in search of water. Suddenly, he spotted a pitcher. "Caw! Caw! Caw! Caw!" he shouted with excitement. "A pitcher! A pitcher full of water!" And he flew down to quench his thirst. The pitcher was very large, and it did have water in it, but the water was very little and was at the bottom. The crow just could not reach down far enough even to get a single sip. He said to himself, "If I push it over, maybe I will be able to get a drink." He tried with all his strength, but the pitcher was too heavy and he could not do so. He was most upset. He was so thirsty that he wanted to cry. However, he would not give up so easily. "I must find a way of getting the water," he said to himself. Just then he spotted some pebbles lying nearby. An idea struck him. He carried a pebble in his beak and dropped it in the pitcher. As he did that, the level of the water went up a little. Then he brought another pebble and dropped it into the pitcher too. He saw that the water rose a little higher. Then he picked up another pebble and dropped it into the pitcher, and another, and another. He kept putting in the pebbles till the level of the water rose right to the top. He was indeed very happy. He planted his claws firmly on the rim of the pitcher and had a very satisfying drink. And after that, he held his head up and cawed away to show his satisfaction. "Caw! Caw! 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 Caw!" What does this story teach us, children? Never give up. There is always a way. The next story is about the wolf in sheep's clothing. Once upon a time, a wolf lived at the end of a forest, and he had to hunt all day long to find food. He would wait in hiding for a small beast and pounce on it. Sometimes he would miss his prey and again have to wait for the whole day. He was a lazy animal and did not like to take all this trouble to find food for himself. One day he thought to himself, "I will disguise myself as some timid animal, and then it will be easy to find my prey. Nobody will be scared of me then, and nor will anyone chase me away. Ha ha!" He suddenly remembered that he had spotted the skin of a dead sheep in the forest just the previous day. He hurriedly went to the spot and, finding the skin still there, put it over his body. He fitted it carefully so that none of his brown fur showed anywhere, and sneakily joined a flock of sheep that were grazing near the forest. His clever trick worked very well. A small little lamb thought that the wolf in sheep's clothing was his mother and kept following him wherever he went. Meh, meh, meh. Wherever the wolf went, the little sheep went behind him. When evening drew near, the wolf slipped off from the herd and went off into the forest, with the little lamb still behind him. Now that he had escaped the shepherd's eye, he turned round, pounced on the little lamb, and had a hearty meal. "Ah, ah!" said the horrible wolf, smacking his lips after he had finished with the poor lamb. "That was a good little meal I had, but tomorrow I shall have a better one. I shall kill one of the fatter sheep, and that should satisfy my hunger." The next day, the wolf again wore his disguise and mingled with the herd. But unfortunately, he could not slip off in right time, and along with the other sheep, the farmer pushed him into the pen. That day, the farmer was having a feast. He decided to slaughter one of his fat sheep for the family meal. Taking a large knife, he went into the pen and cut the throat of the first fat animal he could spot. And that animal happened to be the wolf. So, children, this story proves to us, don't pretend to be what you are not. The next story is about the strength of the wind and the sun. Once the wind and the sun were having an argument. "I have the strongest power in the universe," said the sun proudly. "Nothing can stand against me." "Oh no," said the wind. "My strength is far greater than yours." "Let us prove ourselves and settle our argument," said the sun patiently. "Do you see that man walking down the road?" "Yes, I can see him," replied the wind. "Well, whichever one of us makes him take off his coat will be considered the stronger one. Do you agree?" "Yes, I agree," answered the wind. "All right, you try first," the sun said, and hid himself behind a cloud. The wind began showing his strength by blowing hard. The man bent his head. The wind blew harder, and the man began shivering. The wind whistled and roared, and the man pulled his coat tightly around him. The wind raged and sent icy blasts against the man, but the man firmly held on to his coat and buttoned it all up. The wind had failed. "And now it is my turn," said the sun with a smile as he came out from behind the clouds. At first the sun shone very gently. The man heaved a sigh and unbuttoned his coat. Then the sun shone a little brighter, and the whole earth was filled with warmth. The man took off his coat and hung it on his shoulder and walked off happily, whistling to himself. So, children, the sun has proved to us that when force fails, gentleness often succeeds. This is another famous story about the fox and the crow. A crow had once stolen a piece of cheese from a cottage window and had flown with it to a tall tree and settled down on a branch to enjoy it peacefully. Just then, a fox who was walking by looked up and saw the crow with the cheese in his mouth. The fox wished he could have the piece of cheese, and his mouth began to water. If I'm clever enough, I will somehow manage to get the piece of cheese, he said to himself. Then an idea struck him. He looked up and, giving a sly smile, said, "Good afternoon, Miss Crow. You're looking so beautiful. Your feathers are glistening in the sunlight." The crow felt pleased with this praise and, looking down at the fox, nodded her head. "Even your neck is as graceful as a swan," the fox continued with his flattery. "Your wings are mightier than any eagle's, and your voice must be as sweet as that of a nightingale. If only I could hear you sing." The crow was so pleased with all this praise that he wanted to show the fox how well he could sing. But as soon as he opened his mouth to caw, the cheese fell straight into the hands of the cunning fox waiting below. That was not all. As the fox walked off with the cheese, he turned round and shouted out to the crow, "If you heard me well, I talked a lot about your beauty, but I said nothing about your brains." The crow just sat there with his mouth open and watched the cunning fox walk off with the piece of cheese. And this story proves to us that we should not be fooled by flattery. The next story is about the lion and the mouse. Once upon a time, deep in the forest, the king of the animals, the lion, was having his afternoon nap. Just then, a little mouse, looking for something to eat, happened to run over the paws of the sleeping lion. The lion jumped up with a roar and seized the little mouse. He was about to crush the little animal with his paw when the mouse cried out, "Please, please, I beg you, oh great king, please spare me. I'm sorry to have woken you up. Please spare me this time." "Nothing doing," said the lion, roaring back in reply. "You have disturbed my sleep, and I shall eat you up." "Oh, my lord, I'm just a tiny mouthful. I will not even satisfy your hunger, and I will not taste good. Please, I may be able to help you someday. You never know. Please let me off now." On hearing this, the lion burst out laughing. "You and help me! Ha 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 ha!" And he decided to let the creature go. Many days passed by. One day, the lion, who was getting old in age, was easily caught in a hunter's net. He had no strength to break himself loose. He began to roar loudly in fear and pain. Now the little mouse, whose life had been spared by the lion, happened to hear the roaring, and he recognized it. "The lion seems to be in trouble. I must see if I can help him." And saying this, the little mouse scurried off in the direction of the lion. On seeing the lion caught in the net, the brave little mouse wasted no time. He began gnawing at the ropes that bound the lion. Chew, 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 chaw, 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 chaw. He kept gnawing with his sharp teeth till one by one all the ropes snapped up and the huge lion was set free. This just shows to us children that we should not belittle little things. And this story is about the country maid and the pail of milk. There was once a milkmaid. She was a pretty girl and happily went about doing her work. But she was also a bit of a dreamer. One day, as she was carrying a pail of milk on her head on the way to the market, she began thinking of what she would do with the money she would get that day after selling all the milk. "I will get a good bit of money," she said to herself. "With that money, I shall buy 2 dozen eggs. I shall then put the eggs under our old hen and wait for her to hatch them. When they are hatched, I shall have a whole yard full of little chicks." And she got more and more excited. "I shall only sell them in winter when they are really expensive, and I will get more money for them. And with that money, I shall buy myself a new dress. What color shall it be? I think it will be green. Everyone says I look good in green. I'll even buy matching ribbons and a hat. No, I think I should buy a blue dress. It will match my eyes. Of course, I look best in pink. Anyway, I'll have a beautiful new dress for the fair. All the young men will want to dance with me, and all the girls will be jealous of me. But who cares? I will just toss my head at them like this." And she did just that. She gave her head such a toss that the pail full of milk fell off and the milk was spilled. So it was goodbye to the eggs, goodbye to the chicks, the dress, the ribbons, goodbye to the boys at the fair, goodbye to everything, and goodbye to all her daydreams. The young milkmaid had learnt a lesson. Don't count your chickens before they are hatched. The Dog in the Manger. Children, many of you must have heard the phrase dog in the manger. You must have often heard your friends saying, "Don't be a dog in the manger." But do you know how that phrase came about? I will tell you. Once, a farmer's dog decided to make a comfortable home on a huge pile of hay that lay in the cow's manger. The cow had gone to work in the fields during the day. And when she came back, she found the dog fast asleep on the pile of hay. Now the cow was really very hungry after a long and tiring day of work, and she found the dog sleeping right on top of her food. "Please get down, dog. You are lying on my food," the cow said. "Go away," the dog snapped angrily. "Can't you see I'm sleeping? Now don't disturb me and go away." "But dear friend, you are sleeping on our food," the cow coaxed him. "Yes, you can't sleep on our food," said the donkey, who had followed the cow into the barnyard. "You don't eat hay, but we do." "I'll go away," the dog barked angrily. And he kept on barking and even ran after them to bite them and chase them out of the manger. Then he came back and again made himself comfortable on the hay and once again fell asleep, leaving the poor cow and the donkey to go without food. And so, when you are keeping something of someone that you yourself do not need, you are like the dog in the manger. And this story is about the goose with the golden eggs. There was once a man who had a very special goose. Every day it laid a golden egg. He became richer and richer day by day. People came from far and wide to see the goose that laid the golden egg. Now this man was greedy. Even though he got richer and richer day after day, he was yet not satisfied. The more he got, the more he wanted. He decided to get all the treasure at once. Once he made up his mind, he brought an axe and killed the goose. But when he cut her open, instead of finding lots and lots of golden eggs, he realized that she was like any other ordinary goose that laid just one egg a day. We learn a good lesson from this story. Beware of being greedy. And this story is about the boy who cried wolf. A farmer had employed a boy to look after his sheep and take them grazing on the hillocks and the countryside. But he was getting bored of this work day after day. He wanted to do something exciting. One day, an idea struck him. As he was walking down a hill with his flock of sheep, he saw many farmers working in the fields. He suddenly started shouting, "Help! Help! Wolf! Wolf! Help!" All the farmers rushed out of their fields with long sticks and shovels and pitchforks to help the boy. But when they reached him, they found him sitting relaxed on a tree and laughing. "I was getting bored, so I decided to have some fun." The angry farmers went back to their fields. The boy found this an interesting sport. So some days later, again he cried out for help. "Wolf! Wolf! Please someone help! Wolf!" This time, only a few people came to help, but again they were fooled. One day, it so happened that a real wolf came out of the forest. The boy was taken unawares. He was frightened out of his wits and began screaming at the top of his voice, "Help! Help! It's a real wolf! The wolf is attacking the sheep! Please someone help!" But alas, no one came to his rescue. They all thought he was playing tricks again. And so the wolf killed quite a few sheep and had a good meal, while the boy watched on helplessly from a tall branch of a tree. The story of the silly boy teaches us a lesson. A liar will not be believed, even if he speaks the truth. And this story is about the cat and the mice. A bad, greedy cat had terrorized a whole family of mice. They were all very tired of the cat. She would sneak up on them and pounce on them and gobble them up. When their numbers started becoming less, they really got very worried. One day, an old mouse suggested, "Let us hold a meeting and find a solution to our problem." All the mice agreed to this and met the same day at a safe place away from the clutches of the cat. Many different suggestions were made, but none seemed good enough. Then one little mouse stood up and said, "If the cat had a little bell tied on her neck, it would tinkle each time she walked, and it would also warn us and give us time to run to safety." All the mice applauded the little mouse for his brilliant idea. But suddenly one of them spoke up and said, "It's a very good idea, but may I ask, who will bell the cat?" There was pin-drop silence. So children, the mice could not solve their problem. It's easier to think up a plan than to carry it out. The Travelers and the Bear. Two travelers were once walking through a forest. It was getting dark, and they had to reach their destination even if it meant traveling by night. The first traveler, walking very close to the other, said, "I do not like the looks of this place. I'm feeling quite scared. But luckily, we are two of us and we are good friends. If we stick together, nobody can harm us." The second traveler agreed, and they continued walking briskly through the dark forest. Just as they were walking, a huge bear suddenly appeared in their path. The first traveler forgot all about his conversation and, without a thought for his friend, gave a big yell and sprang up a tall tree. The second traveler was alone, and he knew he had no chance single-handed against the huge bear. He threw himself down flat on the ground without any movement, and he even stopped breathing. He had once heard that a bear would not touch dead meat. The bear walked up to the second traveler lying on the ground, sniffed him all over, and nuzzled his head and nose and ears. All this while, the traveler never moved at all, and he also held his breath. The bear thought that the man was dead, and giving a big growl, he walked away. When he thought that he was totally safe, the first traveler came sliding down the tree and rushed to the second traveler. "Well, my friend, we both are saved. But tell me, what did the bear tell you in your ears?" "Aha!" said the second traveler as he got up and dusted himself. "He told me never to trust anyone who says he will stand by you and then runs away when there is trouble." And saying this, he walked away into the forest, leaving the first traveler standing there in shame. So children, the two travelers and the bear's story tells us a friend in need is a friend indeed. The Dog and the Shadow. Once a hungry stray dog was wandering about the marketplace in search of food. Just then, he spotted a juicy bone at a butcher's shop. He sneaked up to it, and when the butcher was busy serving a customer, the cunning dog quickly grabbed the large bone and ran off as fast as his legs could carry him. He decided to find a lonely spot so that he could eat his bone in peace. While he was searching for the spot, he had to cross a bridge that went across a rivulet. As he was crossing the bridge, he happened to see his own shadow in the water. He thought that it was another dog with another large bone, and to his greedy eyes, that bone seemed larger than his own. He wanted to have both. "I will fight the dog, and he will run away, leaving the bone behind for me," he said to himself. He snarled and barked loudly and made a grab for the other dog's bone. But in the process, his own bone was dropped. It fell in the water, sank down, and was lost forever. The poor silly dog had to slink away with his head hanging low, more hungry than before. So we learn that in being greedy, we grasp at the shadow, we lose the substance. The Fox and the Grapes. Once a hungry fox wandered all over the countryside searching for something to eat. He had not eaten the whole day and was really very hungry. Just then, he happened to pass a vineyard. He spotted a very juicy-looking bunch of grapes, and his mouth began to water. "Ah, here is my dinner," he said to himself, smacking his lips, and gave one big leap to pull it down. But unfortunately, it was beyond his reach. He did not give up so easily. He went back a few steps, took a running start, and jumped again. And again he missed. He tried once more, jumping with all his might, but again failed to get the tempting bunch of grapes. By then he was too tired and worn out. Giving one last longing look at the bunch of grapes, he slowly walked out of the vineyard, saying to himself, "Actually, I was not so hungry, so it does not matter. And besides, I'm sure those grapes are sour." What does this story of the fox and the grapes teach us, children? There is comfort in pretending that what we can't get is not worth having. And this story is about the fox and the stork. Once a fox and a stork were good friends, but it was a very queer friendship, for the fox was always playing tricks on the stork. One day he invited the stork to his house for dinner. The stork was overjoyed to receive the invitation and went to the fox's house right on time. But when dinner was served, the stork was surprised to get only soup served in a shallow dish. "Isn't it delicious?" asked the fox as he lapped up all the soup and smacked his lips. The stork gave no reply. Since she had a long bill, she could not bring up the soup and had to remain hungry that evening. The fox continued to enjoy the soup and said, "Soup is my favorite dish. It's really sad you don't like it." The stork thought for a while and then replied, "I'm not very hungry tonight, but I would like you to return the visit. Tomorrow night, will you come to my house for dinner?" The greedy fox willingly agreed. The next evening, he went to the stork's house feeling hungry, and when he sniffed the air, the food smelt good. He waited patiently while the stork went to the kitchen to fetch the dinner. But when she brought it to the table, it was served in a long jar with a very narrow mouth. "Isn't it delicious?" the stork asked the fox as he dipped his beak into the jar and enjoyed every piece of food he picked up. This time the fox said nothing. He could not reach the delicious food as his jaw could not go through the narrow opening of the vessel. All he did was to sit and watch hungrily as the stork ate and lick whatever dripped on the ground or the outside of the vessel. He had been well treated. The lesson learned from this story is, one good turn deserves another, and so does a bad turn. This story is about the miller, the son, and the donkey. One day, a miller and his son were driving their donkey to market. As they went along, they came across a group of young girls who giggled and said, "My, what foolish people they are! They are trudging along on foot when the donkey can easily carry one of them on his back. Just look at them!" The father and son overheard them, and it did make sense. So the father lifted his son and put him on the donkey, and they continued their journey in this manner. Along the way, they came across a few farmers going to the field. One of them stopped the son and scolded him. "You should be ashamed of yourself, you lazy fellow! Have you no respect for your old father? You are merely sitting comfortably on the donkey while your poor father is walking beside you. What is this world coming to? The least you can do is to get down and let your poor father rest his weary bones." And saying this, they pulled the boy down from the donkey's back and helped the father sit on it. This way they continued their journey. A little further, they came across a group of young men. On seeing the old man sitting on the donkey, they began making fun of him. "Just look at that selfish old man sitting comfortably while the poor boy stumbles along in the dust." When the old man heard this, he lifted his son also, and they both rode on the donkey. Just when they were going to reach the marketplace, a man stopped them and asked, "Have you no pity for the poor dumb creature? Just because he cannot voice his complaint, you are loading him like this? The two of you together are more capable of carrying the poor donkey." The miller wanted to do the right thing always. So he and his son got off the donkey, tied his legs together, and slinging him on a pole upside down, carried him on their shoulders. A huge crowd at the marketplace saw this funny sight and laughed so loudly that the poor frightened donkey kicked through the tied cords that bound him and fell off the pole straight into a river they were crossing. That was the end of the poor donkey. And the moral? He who tries to please everybody pleases nobody. And this story you now hear is about the bundle of sticks. There was an old farmer who was on his deathbed. He was very sad to leave his dear farm that had seen such glorious days during his time, and he was also very sad to leave his family. But what made him most upset was that his 3 sons were always quarreling. The old man had always told them the importance of living together in peace, but none of them bothered to listen to him. One day, as he lay on his deathbed, he asked his eldest son to get him a bundle of sticks. When the bundle was brought to him, the old man said, "Now tie the bundle firmly." That was also done. Then the old man again told his eldest son, "Son, you break the bundle." He tried, but he could not do it. The old man called his second son and said, "Son, you try." But even he failed to do so. Then the third son was